So we're getting to that time of the year now where everyone's starting to look towards a final design and how they're gonna portray that in their final presentations, portfolios, in the end of year degree show. So with that in mind, I'm just gonna do a really quick tutorial today on Enscape. Enscape is a really easy real-time rendering software that can be plugged into Revit or SketchUp. It's quite easy to master and you can get some quite good results quite quickly, hence why we're just gonna cover the very basics today. As with all tutorials, there's different ways of doing things, and there's far more than I can cover in this short tutorial today. So please go online. There's a wealth of information on Enscape's own website and also on YouTube or on video streaming softwares. But this is really just to give you an idea of the interface. So in terms of licenses, if you are a University of Salford student watching this, you have a free Enscape license as part of your complimentary softwares that we offer at the University of Salford. In order to understand how you can access this, you just need to head on to Apps Anywhere and type in Enscape and then read the instructions and follow those. If you're not a University of Salford student, it's good to know that as a University of Salford student, we offer our students most softwares that they would need for free whilst they are a student with us. So for more information on our courses, please head over to our website. So it's useful as well to explain at this point that on Enscape's website, which you'll find at chaos.com, you will find a lot of sample Enscape projects that you can download just to give you a good idea of how it might work and an idea of materials. So I'm into free sample projects, chaos.com, and we've got projects for Revit, we've got projects for SketchUp, and we've got projects for SketchUp on the Mac, Rhino, and Rhino on Mac, and then this is on towards ArchiCAD, etc. So you can just download these projects as standalone. We'll download it in a standalone viewer. .skp is obviously a SketchUp file and .rvt is a Revit file. So these are a good starting point to start to understand how things work in Enscape. So this is one such project that I've downloaded in Revit. One other thing to note is that when you come into the project, when you download the project file and unzip it, there's a few different things in here, but there's one here usually called first read me. It's really important to read this first, as it will explain within that sample project you've downloaded how you need to relink the materials and some other custom assets that you might need to relink in order for Revit to show as they intend it to. So always good to read the README. Now Enscape, you can find it in Revit in its own tab along the top, and here we'll have a few different buttons that we'll go through. On the right hand side, you've got your Chaos account, so this is where you might need to sign in if you're not already signed in. In SketchUp, it's a similar situation. So in SketchUp, if you come into extensions, you should have one called Enscape. Now this will show all those same buttons that Revit shows. If you want them in panel, you just need to right click on your panel at the top, come along to Enscape, and that will give you the Enscape toolbar. Just stop wherever you prefer to have it. Again, it's the same, largely the same interface in SketchUp and Revit. For the purposes of today, I'm going to be focusing on Enscape within Revit. But as you can see there, it's going to be a similar user interface for both SketchUp and Revit. So within our Revit project, the first thing we're going to do is going to hit this start window here. And that's just going to take a couple of minutes to load the scene. It might throw up a few errors if you've got any missing maps or anything like that. And then it will start the Enscape viewer. So what we have here is a real-time rendered view of our sample model. Now this is easy to do if you've got two monitors, but for the purpose of this tutorial, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to split my screens in half. Obviously, it's not ideal because you only get tiny little snippets. But if you, like I say, if you've got two monitors, it makes it a lot easier to do. I'm just going to shut this panel down too, just so that you get more of the screen. But what all this is just showing you some general controls, how to how to navigate the model, and then some other tools here. I'm going to shut it down, but if we run it back, we just press the help key. Now, what we need to do here is if you come into the Revit window and you click the synchronize views, what this does is if I navigate in Revit, it will update the view in Enscape. So I'm going to come into a few different setup camera views in Revit, and you can see that my Enscape render updates to reflect that. And we can pause live updates when we're updating things, just if things are getting a little bit slow while we're updating the geometry in Revit or whatever, you can just pause it and then just resume live afterwards. You can also choose a view to see in this view panel here if we don't want to use the actual 3D views within our project browser in Revit. So different ways that we can navigate the model, and then also we can obviously just kind of orbit and move as you would do in Revit. So the first thing we're going to look at is some materials. And again, for the purposes of video, it's easier if I expand this back out again. And I'll just minimize and maximize the render to show you as I need to. Again, if you've got two screens, it's a lot easier. Now, what we want to navigate to along the Enscape interface at the top here, so we're going to go to Enscape Material Library. Now, these are all render ready, pre-programmed materials created for the Enscape render system that you can drag and drop into your project. So it's pretty self-explanatory, but we've got bricks here, we've got metals, you've got roofs, wallpaper, all sorts of kind of external textures. You can search for things, but let's say I want to bring in this copper here. I just click it and then click import selection. The other way to, if you've got some materials that you know you're going to use a lot, you can favorite them and then always be here in your favorites. So you can multi-select or just select one, and we want to make a note of it, copper A5 embossed. I want to import it into our project. Now, this is where Revit and SketchUp might differ a little bit. In Revit, if we want to modify a material, what we need to do is we need to come into the properties for whatever that piece of geometry is. So this is, for example, a wall, and I want to change this plaster here to be this embossed copper. So to change materials in Revit, we need to find the type, edit the type. We need to go into the structure, and we want to edit, it's the finish layer that we want to edit. So what is currently plaster? We want to find that metal embossed. So it's called A5 copper embossed. Here it is here. And we press OK. Now when we go back into our render, we can see that the white plaster has turned into the embossed copper. So in that way, we can just go through all the materials that Enscape already has in there. For instance, let's say actually I want it to be like a grey engineering brick to be on it. Or something. So that's brick A3. Let's go back into our, as you can see, it's currently our copper. I'm going to edit that type again. Editing the finished material. It was brick A3. So we can just search for it there. There it is there. And then we can see it's updated from the copper into this brick. So let's look at what if we want to alter a material, an Enscape material. Let's take this brick that we've just added as an example. So if we come into the Enscape window and Enscape material editor, this is where we can edit materials, create our own materials, or alter some of the. This is where we can edit materials or create our own materials. So let's search for that brick A3. Okay, so this is the material editor interface. Now, different materials might have a different type, which then generates different parameters. For instance, the self-illuminated will have different parameters than the glass, which we'll be looking at, and refraction and transparency. Clear coat will have more kind of reflective characteristics, but most materials you want to use are probably going to be generic. So let's look at what each of these windows means. Now, albedo, so this is your base color or your base kind of texture map that reflects essentially the base of what your texture is going to look like. So, for example, for this brick, our albedo is this grey brick pattern, which is essentially what it looks like. Now, you might just have a solid colour, depending on what the actual texture is. For this, obviously, it's the brick. Now, the tint colour, we could change the tint of the brick. So, for instance, we made it pink. Then you can see that even though we've still got that base JPEG image, the tint has changed to pink. This is also where you can plug in your own texture images for certain materials if you want to, PNGs or JPEGs. We could just, so again, if we make it yellow, we get yellow brick. Spin it and do that. Now the height map. So the height map is how we can use a texture map in order to create realistic 3D depths or bumps or dents on the surface of our object without adding extra geometry. So to explain this, let's just go back into our wall, a close-up of our wall here. So as you can see, this wall is just one straight object, but it's showing in our Enscape as the bricks protruding and the mortar being recessed. But you can see that we haven't modeled those individual bricks. It's just a solid piece of geometry. The material effect is giving us the kind of realistic effect of bricks. And the way we do this is through the height map. So if we come back into our editor here, there's 3 different types of map you can use. Now, a bump map, normal map, and displacement map. Now, this is just 3 different ways that the render software simulates depth and lighting on that surface to create illusion of kind of 3D depth. Now, bump map is usually quite a simple black and white image. A displacement map is more kind of complex grayscale image, and a normal map is usually this kind of purpley toned image that you get here. But to be honest, you can just take your map, so you just plug in the map into this, either a PNG or JPEG into this. You just search for that in the folder wherever you've saved your maps. Again, the same with the text view, you can navigate to wherever you save these in your drives. So if we plug in, for example, the normal map, you can play with whether Enscape treats it as a bump map, a normal map, or displacement map to see what effect you want to get, and you can kind of drive that up and down. So to explain that better, except at the moment it's reading it as a displacement map, which gives us this quite strong effect. If I change it to bump map, you can see that it's not really doing it anymore. It's not really giving me the effect that I want because it can't really, the bump is usually black and white, so it's not really reading that very well. Again, if I make it actually a true normal map, giving us a little bit of protrusion, but not as good an effect as using a displacement map. And again, we can ramp the amount up and down, but This will vary on material by material, so just play around until you get the kind of the effect that you're looking for in the height and parameters there. Now, the next one along, this is reflection. So again, here we've got a reflection map. So this is usually black is the least reflective and white is the most reflective. So obviously here you've got different levels of grey. But again, you can change those effects and you can plug in a reflection map here. You can change kind of the reflection, the highlights. So if I was to kind of make this really metallic and I come back into here, you can see we've got a much more kind of a metallic-y brick. Let me go back down. You can also change kind of the specular highlights, which are the pure white areas on the map. But as we've kind of not got much pure white in our map, it won't really be that much in this example. And you might be thinking, how can I kind of create these? It's easy to get a texture map, but how do you create these height maps and reflection maps? Well, if you come to Enscape's website, which I'll just bring up here, and they actually have a blog post about where you can get the textures to build high quality materials within Enscape. And the first website that they recommend is actually one I would also recommend. It's called Polyhaven. So if you go into Polyhaven, you can create a free account, and there's a lot of free resources here. For example, let's just choose a brick in here. Use this red brick, for example. Now, what you can download is, firstly, this is your albedo kind of base texture map, which would go into this panel here. We've got a normal map, we've got a displacement map, we've got one that you could use your highlights, but also this is kind of an ambient occlusion map. This kind of plates kind of soft diffuse reflections here. So all your different textures, you can just be able to not just download the base image, but also kind of reflections, the bumps. So that's one that I'd recommend, and they also have some other ones on here. So definitely something to have a look through. You should be able to get most textures that you are looking for already set up for you. You can also, of course, create your own. So to do that, we need to first create a material in Revit. So we come into Manage, and this is materials within the Revit interface, not within the Enscape ribbon. So we come into the material browser in the Manage ribbon, and create a new material, and you can name whatever you want to name it. So let's just call it Enscape test material, and then we can find that. And then so you can either plug in you can start to plug in things within the Revit browser, or you can go straight into Enscape. So once you've created it, you press OK. And then if you come back into Enscape Material Editor and search for Enscape test material, there we go. So this is the new material that we've just set up. So you can just start to populate this to create your own custom material. If you wanted it to be illuminated, there's different parameters. If you wanted it to be glass, the other way you can create custom materials is if you know that you could start with a material that you know is like nearly what you want, and then copy that and develop it up. So to show you an example, I've decided that I want my kind of box at the top of the building, I want it to be like an embossed copper. So to give you an example of what I mean, let's say like something like this kind of perforated copper sheet, that's what I want it to be. So I can see to start with that around the windows we've got some copper window reveals. So I'm going to use this material as my starting point, and then I'm going to edit it. So to do that, I need to first find the window material, and I know that it's called Window Frames Metal, this one here. So if I go back into the Manage ribbon, materials, and I know it's called wind frames metal. I'm going to duplicate this material here. I'm gonna call it um, OO metal perforated panel. So then we can find that OO metal perforated panel. Okay, and then I'm going to click OK. And then I'm going to come back into my Enscape material editor. And I'm going to find that material. Right, so this is our new metal perforated panel material. I'm just going to apply that to this wall here so that we can see it being edited. Right, so we're going to the edit type and I change that grip for my perforated panel. You can see that at the moment it just looks the same as the window reveal, so like a solid copper colour, no perforations yet. We want to try and get it to something like this. So to do this, we need to basically create a cutout material, and we need to tell Enscape what's going to be cut out, what's not going to be cut out. So where we plumb this in is in our material editor. Down here under transparency that's cut out, what this means is I can add another map here which tells Enscape which bits of my material I want to cut out and which bits I want to be solid. So which bits are going to be transparent, which bits are going to be solid. Anything on my map that's black, solid black, is completely transparent. Anything that's white is completely opaque. So to give you an idea of this, firstly, I need to create this cutout map. So again, I could create this in Illustrator or Photoshop or find some clip art. The other place to look for things is Adobe Stock. You all have, as part of your Photoshop licensing, free unlimited images on Adobe Stock. So if I was to type in something like seamless crosshatch vector pattern, some of these are patterns that I could use as my cutout. Now, when I say seamless, I'll explain this shortly. I'm looking for something that's kind of a bit like a crosshatch. Let's see if I can find like this kind of thing, basically. This is what I'm looking for. So if I download it as a JPEG, I'm going to find it here, and then I'm going to open Photoshop. Okay, so this is my and that I've downloaded from Adobe Stock. Now, when we say seamless, the reason that this won't currently work for our cutout is that if you imagine the way that Enscape and all 3D renderers work is they'll just repeat this pattern again and again and again across the material. So as you can see here, because we've got uneven gaps at the side, when it repeats this pattern, it's not going to be seamless. We're going to see these gaps between the pattern. So a little bit earlier, I altered this so that it's seamless. So what this means now, just to explain it better to you, if I was to copy this and make my board double the sides on both sides, see how when I'm copying it across now, you can't see the joints between it. It's a seamless texture, whereas this one, if I was to copy this one across, you can see the joints between it. It's not seamless. So this is a process that I followed earlier to create a seamless texture. You can read some more into how to create your own seamless textures, or maybe we can do another tutorial on it, but I have already saved this one. So I'm just going to come back into my panel and we're going to keep the color because we like that. We like the bump on it. We like all the reflections. It's going to be the same as the window. But we're just looking at changing this cutout. So what we need to do is we need to update this map here to our new cutout map, which is there. Obviously, don't save things in your downloads, put them somewhere proper. I'm just doing this for speed. Now, when we first look at this in our renderer, what you can see is it's not quite what we want, because we can't really see what's going on here, and that's because the scale's not quite right yet. So we need to come back into our material editor, and if we click on the map here, it's going to give you some more controls. So this is saying that that panel there that you can see in front of you is 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter. So obviously that scale's going to give us really tiny little cutout. So we need to change this, so maybe it is 1 meter by 1 meter. And let's see what that does. Yes, so now you can see that everything that is flat, so our crosses, has been cut out of the material, and everything that is white is still solid. And we could actually also invert that if we wanted to. We could obviously create more of a mesh kind of thing, but we don't want to do that for this particular material. I'm actually going to make it 1/2 meter by 1/2 meter. See what that does. Obviously, you'd have to update the geometry behind because we can literally see all the internal walls, but you get the idea of how you can start to make some quite interesting materials just by playing with these kind of cut ideas to make perforated ones, that kind of things. So the next thing we're going to look at is some assets, some other assets. Like in our model at the moment, you can see we've got some trees that are actually moving, we've got planting, things like that. What if we wanted to add like some more trees in this corner or something like that? How do we do that? So we need to come into the asset library here. It's got a little tree. Now this has got kind of all the assets that are currently in our project in here. So if we want to add to this, come to the Enscape tab at the top here, and we've got so many different furniture, lighting, vegetation, props, people. The list is endless. There's so much stuff in here that you can just browse it in your own time. Collections, street props, all sorts. Let's say actually we don't need any more vegetation. How about a few little benches in this corner so that people can have a little break from work? So we could come into, let's say, furniture, and you can either start to look through each category or you could actually just type in bench, see, try and find something that looks quite nice. This is nice. So again, you can, if you click on it, it'll give you some more information about it. Sometimes there's some symbols here often quite useful. So adjustable asset means you can alter it. Sometimes it'll tell you if it's a really high poly object. On that note, actually, while you're putting things in, I'd pause like updates because it can get quite heavy. Tell you about kind of other objects that might be in the same family kind of thing. And then so if you want that, you can almost also favorite things that you're going to use often so that they come up at the top of your searches. So we can import this, so we can either place it on an active work plane, on a surface, or link the family to an asset. I'm just going to place it on a surface for now. I'm going to place it on this surface here. And then I can add multiple objects, and you can see they're kind of snapping to certain planes. You can also, like all Revit families, I can hit spacebar to rotate around, and then when I am done, I can just press escape and come out of that. Okay, and you can see actually that your family as well is, you can view it within the properties tab. So you could, as with all the Revit families, you can move it around, align it to different levels, alter the elevation. You can also change the phasing if you're doing kind of phase diagrams, so it behaves very much in the way that other Revit families might do. So, and you can see like copy them across, modify in the way you would do any other Revit family. You've just brought it in from Enscape, so it should be render ready. So if we want to go, let's see what it looks like. So let's resume live. And then if we go back into our Enscape model, there we go. We can see we've got our 3 benches there. Obviously, you will line them up and make them look a lot better than I have. So we go to one of the kind of front on views. You can kind of see them behind this car. Let's hide that on. Yeah, so we can see them there. Okay, and obviously you can explore the asset library in your own time. There's like all the assets you could ever need in there. The last thing we're just going to touch upon is lighting. So to do this, I'm just going to go into a different view here and look at one of the, here we are here, and I'm going to have a look at one of the lights that Enscape's put in. So for instance, we've got a spotlight here, which is a lighting fixture. You need to make sure that your lights are lighting fixtures to be able to use them properly. But so if we want to look at how light is emitted from one of these lamps here, we need to go into the family itself in Revit as you would do a normal family. Okay, so we've got the actual lighting fixture, and then we've got this, which is the light source. So if we come into the photometrics light source definition, this is going to show us how the light is emitted. Is it going to be in a web? Is it going to be a spot? So we can change that to a spot. And then if we loaded that into the project, and go into our Revit, into our Enscape, you can see that we've got this kind of an IES bloom on the wall that we didn't have before because we've changed those spotlights. If we undo that, go back, can you see that it's much more of a subtle light now? So let's say we actually want to keep it like that. Within your actual project folder, if you come into the edit type of the lighting fixture, you can come down here and you can change the intensity of the lighting. You can change the angle, so we can make it like that. You see this makes it more of a wider cone. So just loads of things you can play around with. Again, there's additional tutorials online that specifically focus on lighting. But this is the kind of thing that you can look at. So we've kind of covered materials, we've covered objects, we've covered lighting. The next thing to look at is how we actually render an image and how we save that out. So I'm going to actually stick with this coffee bar theme to look at the rendering settings. So to do this, we come into our Enscape window. And let's just have a look at some of the buttons that we've got across the top here. So this is view management. This can take us to the other views that are set up in Revit. Lighting management, this shows us all our lighting that we've got in here. And again, we can make some adjustments to this within the Enscape viewer as well. Asset library, then it's just going to show us all the assets that we've got in our scene. And we can alter that in here as well. Video editor as you're doing fly through. Veris, I haven't used this yet. It's something to do with AI variations of your project. I'll do some research into that and we'll see how we can get to. This is the rendering, so this is how we save out our render, which is called a screenshot in Enscape. And again, AI enhancements and batch rendering. If you want to render several scenes at once, you can use the batch renderer. If you want to export a scene to continue in a standalone Enscape or V-Ray, panorama, like this is to get into the standalone Enscape model. We've got a map so you can see whereabouts you are in your file. Save frame, what this does is if I'm rendering at HD, which is 1920 by 1080, putting the save frame on shows me what won't be on my render. So for example, at the moment, I might think that these bits along the edges are going to be on the render, but when I turn on the save frame, I can see that actually they're going to be cut off. And similarly, if you're rendering like a square, once you've set that up in the view settings, the C-frame will become the square. Just helps you to understand what's actually going to be rendered and what's not. I'm going to keep it on for now. This shows the perspective 2 point. This is how you can fly through your model in Enscape. So this is good for presentations and things like this. We'll cover this more in our studio sessions for L6 and actually soon for the other levels too. It's really easy to use one of our meta quests that we have at your disposal at the University of Salford. So we have several of these available to you. All you need to do is you plug them in, you press this button, and instantly you can navigate through your Enscape model in the VR headset. And we'll be covering that more in studio sessions coming up. Now, this is the button we want to really look at now, and this is the visual settings. So let's dive into this. Again, there's a lot of things to cover here, so I'm just going to go ahead and you can investigate these more in your own time. So style, you can actually you can have it as a rendered photoreal style like this, or you can play around with the different styles available. So you can have like a watercolor, sketch, etc., etc. And actually, if you hover over the top, it tells you what each of them is, which is quite useful. You can also turn outlines on to make it kind of more sketchy. Again, camera, so you want it in perspective, most likely. You want to keep auto exposure on probably, unless you want to play with the exposure yourself, but I'd just keep it on for what you're doing. Field of view, so this will zoom in and out to show more or less of you've seen if you wanted to adjust it in here. So one thing with field of view, when you're ready to render, what you just need to go and double check is you want to pause live updates and you don't want to be synchronizing the views at this time because you're going to set this up in here. Depth of field, so this changes kind of the blurriness around the outside of the picture if you wanted to focus on one focal point, and you can kind of set where that focal point is. I don't really want any. It's usually quite good for kind of external shots more than internal. And then rendering quality, what I'd say is whilst you're testing these things, I'd keep it on kind of medium or draft. And then when it's the final render, I'd bump that right up to ultra. But it's obviously a lot heavier and it'll impact the performance. So that's why just keep it on medium or even draft while you're testing that. And then go to ultra for your final render. Image, I'd leave auto contrast on. Saturation and temperature, this can change kind of the saturation will change kind of how saturated your colors are. If you want it hyper, again, I just keep this on 100 and then you can change this in post in Photoshop afterwards. If you want color temperature again, that will change kind of the heat of your image. Motion blur, self-explanatory, lens flare for outside, blooms, vignettes. These are all kind of additional effects that you can add to your render. Okay, so atmosphere. Again, if you wanted a fog to it, if you're outside, you can add fog. Illumination. These are all kind of things that you want to play around with in terms of the brightness. If it's nighttime view, shadow sharpness, and these will update in real time, so you can play with them and then you can undo it. Artificial light brightness, so in an internal shot like this, if I wanted to really pump it up. Wind, so you saw before, our outside trees were blowing in the wind. So if you're doing kind of a video, exporting a video, this will change that. So and the direction and the angle of that. Coming to the sky here. So if you want just no sky and white background, you can take this. Obviously we're in an internal shot, but if you come into here, if you want to add your own sky, and there's some preset skies here, but if you want to add your own sky, you want to go into Skybox, and then you want to load the Skybox from the file, and you need a HDRI. So again, you can either get HDRIs in Polyhaven. So if you come up here, HDRIs, so you can get your skies in here, or you can get Midjourney to create them as well. But they've got loads of different HDRIs here. So you just download one of these and then you plumb it into here. And then there's some other values that you can play around with there. Like I said, or you can just choose one of the ones that they've already got in here. When you've got your own skybox, it won't ask you about clouds and things like that. But when you're choosing one of their guys, it'll ask you how dense you want the clouds, how the longitude, the latitude, these kind of things. So if you know the longitude and the latitude of your project, you can plumb these in and then give a more realistic contextual setting. Again, if it's dark, you can do the size of the moon. These are kind of additional, these are all just additional settings that it's best to play around with. And then finally, output. So this is where obviously full HD is 1920 by 1080, or you can have a custom, if you wanted it to be a square, you'll now see that my save frame has changed. Don't worry, it's gone dark because my computer's getting a little bit tired at the moment. Or you can just go back to full HD. This box is really important. So we want to export our object ID, material ID, depth channel, and alpha channel. And I'll show you what they are in a second. Basically, what this is going to give us, if you want to make any changes or enhancements to your final render in Photoshop afterwards, then you really need material object IDs and material IDs and an alpha channel. And I'll show you why afterwards. And then format, if you want them as PNGs or JPEGs. PNGs are better for transparency things, or JPEG's probably fine for what you're going to be using. And then set where the folder is that you want to port these into. So I'm just going to create a new folder here called Enscape Test. I'm going to select that folder. And then automatic naming, this will name all your different things for you. May as well put that on. Again, if you're creating a video, you've got some compression quality in frames per second. And then if you're having a panorama, there's settings for that there. So I've flown through those. The Chaos website has loads of helpful information on all these settings and how they all pull together to create your final image. But for now, we're going to say that that is good. And then we want to click this screenshot button here. And this will export our images because we've got one image which is our full color image that you see right there, and then we've actually then exported all of our channels, which you'll see in a second. So let's just give this a few minutes. Okay, so that's finished now, and if we navigate to the project folder where they are saved, what we have here, you can see, is we have our full color image. We've also got the alpha mask of the windows. We've got the depth, so that's because we've got the depth of field on it. We've got our material ID and our object ID, and then don't need to worry about that screen overlay one. Now, why these are really important is if I come into Photoshop, we'll do this more in another tutorial, but just to give you a quick overview of why they're important. So I'm just going to quickly duplicate these into my main image. So let's say I want to make a change to this bronze cladding here. I want to make it lighter. Rather than sitting there masking out all of these panels and having to go around this bend, what we do instead is we find in the material either whichever one works for you. So either this one, that each thing is coloured by materials. So all of the bronze is this purple colour, all of the plasterboard is green colour, etc., etc. And the object ID, every different object has a different colour. So for this one, I'm going to go with material object ID. I'm going to select by colour range. I want to select these, this purple colour, and you probably want not very much fuzziness at all. Fuzziness will like expand the selection, but again, it depends on what your image colors are. So there we go. And then I've just got these three. It's got a bit of the material. This must be the same material under here. So I can just unselect that if I don't want it. And I could now, for example, maybe create a brightness and contrast that's just looking at lightening up those panels or darkening these panels. Or maybe it's that actually I want to change the hue of the panels. And it's just a quicker way to start to alter things than having to sit there like masking around everything. So you can then do that, especially when you've got things like plants. It's an absolute pain. So if you wanted to lighten up all those plants, again, you can just magic wand it as well. So I can just lighten up those plants if I wanted to, and so on and so forth. Anyway, I hope that has given you a good overview and introduction to Enscape today. We'll probably carry these on with a few more tips and tricks how we can take our Enscape image into Photoshop and make some final tweaks to it at a later date. Thank you for watching.